Hey Frase Show, the Hey Frase channel on YouTube, and I am your host, Sarah Fraser. Now, most of you, and many of you who already know me, probably know that I usually co-host a podcast with my dear friend, Andrea Lopez Comedy, every Monday and Wednesday. Have been doing it for years. It's a comedy podcast all about pop culture, our crazy lives, interesting guests. We head to Area 51. But we also, we do talk about our personal lives. And today I wanted to do a podcast on 5 things that nobody tells you when you have a miscarriage. So let me take you back. November 11th, 2019, I had a miscarriage. It was my first pregnancy. I got married to my husband, Dan. We call him, if you listen to the Hey Frase podcast, we call him Schman. So I got married to Schman, August 10th of 2019. 2 weeks after that, I was ovulating and checking my temperature and tracking all my mucuses, and we got pregnant. So we were super excited. It was like first time. This is amazing. So we're going along in our pregnancy, like many of you watching and listening to this can relate to. And our appointments were great. So we went to our first one and we saw our little egg sac and things were looking good. All was well. We did blood work. Everything was awesome. Then we go for like, I think an 8-week checkup, or 9-week, we have a heartbeat. Things are still awesome. Okay, cool. So the next appointment was going to be around the 12 or 13 mark. We were actually going to see our baby. We were going to do genetic testing as far as for Down syndrome and cystic fibrosis and some of the big ones, right? Okay, so we go to, I live here in Virginia. We went to Virginia Hospital Center to a really great, fetal maternal medicine OBGYN. She's awesome. Dr. Kelly. So we're in there in the room, and I'll never forget it. Everybody who's watching or listening knows this. We were getting an ultrasound and the woman performing it was absolutely silent. We're like seeing a head, we're seeing arms and legs. We're like, oh my God, this is great. Like, what do you think? Crickets, right? So you're like, that's weird. They were gone for a really long time. And when she comes back in the room, she says, I hate to tell you this, but you have a triploidy pregnancy. We believe that 2 sperm have fertilized 1 egg. The baby is not developing correctly. And there's all this fluid around. We had a little boy, his heart is going to stop beating. So we'll support you guys, but you have to make a decision. Long and the short, and I've been through all the emotions because a whole bunch of shit's gone down post then. The baby he actually passed that weekend, and then we had a D&E procedure at 15 weeks, and I had something called partial molar pregnancy. Y'all, it's real rare. I am then the 1 percentile in this whole thing because my partial molar pregnancy extracted. Anybody who's had a molar pregnancy means you have no fetus. Partial molar pregnancy means you have a fetus. But essentially what happens is a chromosomal just complete mess. So cysts grow in your ovaries and your placenta. And then in rare cases, when the baby's removed, or even when the placenta is removed, this little mole can grow back, act like a cancer. You have to get methotrexate shots, which is a form of chemo to kill it so it doesn't go to other parts of your body. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm currently going through methotrexate. Yay! But it sounds way worse than it is. It's been a whole journey, but things have been good. So I'm going to do a whole separate podcast on partial molar pregnancies, and hopefully to have on, I'm going to an OBGYN oncologist. I walk into the infusion center. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is my reality. Okay. So I'm going to do a whole nother podcast on that. But through this process, I realized there are 5 things that nobody tells you about having a miscarriage. So I'm going to go through them right now. Which I have on my little Hey Frase cards that my co-host AJ and I use. However, I wrote mine upside down. So these are in no particular order, and I hope they're fun and also emotional and put into really perspective. A miscarriage is a whole range of emotions. It's disappointment. It's also dealing with your partner because they're having all the emotions, your family. And what I think is so shitty about it is the moment that you're pregnant, you really invest so much in this baby, this like sac, this whole thing that you haven't even met yet. And then when that doesn't work out, it's like, oh my God, you feel like you've already met them, which is like the craziest part. So these are in no particular order, and I hope they're fun and also realistic. The first thing I learned about having a miscarriage is you need to be, for me, and this is my advice, and you should experiment and do it as best for you. But I found that the support groups were really not supportive. I don't mean to be a biatch, but Facebook groups to me scared the shit out of me. Okay. It's what I find happens in these groups. It tends to be 4 or 5 voices where nothing in their life is going right. And even though the miscarriage, or in my case, the partial molar group or whatever is supposed to be about supporting, it's basically how everything else in their life is total shite. And I'm like, okay, we have to stick to what worked for you. And is anyone positive here? Because this seems real bad. So I joined these groups for a period of time, but it became so negative and so dark. And I almost actually felt like in a couple of the groups that I was members of, when people did get pregnant and had their rainbow baby, that people were not really happy for them. And for me in this journey, yes, there have been moments where I feel like I've been bitter or resentful and not wanted my other friends to get pregnant. But then that passes because it's like you can't control what's happening. You know, I waited later in life, I'm 37, to get married, to have a family. And so for me, I just turn it over to God. Whatever's going to be is going to be. And we're going to have a family, whether we adopt or get a surrogate. Does anyone want to loan me $100,000? Does anyone want to be my surrogate? So, you know, families come in all shapes and sizes. So I would say proceed with caution with Facebook groups and various support groups. I think you have to find the right group for you. And I think you also, especially if you have a diagnosis like myself, which it wasn't just the miscarriage and, oh, you can try in a month. There were several other steps. You have to protect your mental game. 2, you need to be prepared that the moment you have a miscarriage right after, your best friend, your sister-in-law is going to call you and they're going to be pregnant and real happy. Okay? Great. You're having a baby. And meanwhile, my whole placenta's falling out. Okay, so no, it's true though. I swear, it is like the karmic universe. We have miscarriages and then the minute later, like your bestie gets pregnant. Again, I had this. I am so happy for anyone in my life that is having a baby because I think you realize when you have a miscarriage and you're trying to have a child, then in 8th grade, they make it sound like if a guy blows wind at you 3 times, you're going to get pregnant. Meanwhile, after the age of 25, it is hard. There's so many cobwebs and you need a dusting and cleaning up there. There is so much shit to get out before that kid sticks. All right. So I would say get prepared somebody in your life is definitely going to get pregnant when you are kind of grieving and going through it. Number 3 on the list, this is from my husband, Dan, because I think a lot of times women get a lot of focus when there's a miscarriage, but sometimes our partners, they're going through it too. So from my husband to other men, to other women supporting their partners, to anyone supporting someone who is pregnant, male, female, however you identify, my husband's advice was to keep your wits about you, but also find time to grieve. And what Dan was saying in that is that, it sucks because you're grieving, but you also have to be the emotional support for somebody who's not only emotionally going through it, but physically going through all the symptoms. So Dan and I go to a great couples therapist. I can't recommend. You definitely need to seek help because it's something that's, it just fucks with you in a way that like a breakup doesn't. I think because it's so physical and emotional, there's so many other people involved, your family, loved ones, maybe you've already talked to work about it. So you definitely should seek some form of help that you find to be beneficial to your significant other and your state of mind. But I loved that for the men and the partners out there because I think sometimes they get neglected in this process and it's so sad for them, Dan told me this sweet story about how he went to work and this little girl that he coaches came up to him and said, isn't that your daughter that's like playing over there? And he's like, no, of course we're going through this. And I get emotional even thinking about this, but she's like, no, that's your kid. And he's like, no, I don't have a child. So it's people are going to say things that you don't expect. And I think as a partner, you have to grieve too. Now you're going to make me cry. Anyway, moving on to number 4. Also, ladies, you know this. You have a miscarriage. Get ready for all kinds of insane bodily functions. All right. I had a D&E and then 3 days later was in the hospital watching them give myself an enema because I was so constipated from all the anesthesia. And meanwhile, a friend, this lovely gentleman was like right next to me in the hospital room because there was only like a sheet between us. He was super hammered at 4:00 in the afternoon, whistling at all the nurses and saying hola. It was, and the poor nurses and doctors were on the phone trying to talk to his relatives and being like, oh, your hermano is here. And they were like, yeah, we're busy. We can't come pick him up. Let me tell you, it was an experience of all bodily functions that happen when you have a miscarriage, okay? You've got things coming out. You're checking to make sure they're not coming out. Then you can't poop. I mean, get ready, get prepared. Make sure you asked about bleeding, constipation, any other discharge. It's a real bodily function excursion. Let me just tell you. Anyway, I paid $500 with my emergency room visit to then give myself an enema while they watched me crap. It was very uncomfortable. Okay, it was a low point. Meanwhile, my friend was like, "Hola." Okay, it was. Thank you, sir. Thanks. You could just pause 1 second here. I haven't gone to the bathroom in 3 days, and I've just got to go. Anyway, my last tip of 5 things that nobody tells you about having a miscarriage is I think it's so important to know that you're not alone. For me, after this happened and I dealt with the initial emotions, I feel like over the years I've done a lot of therapy. I have a great support system. So I wanted to talk about it because if it helps one other woman or couple or somebody going through it, it's mind-blowing how many people have issues when it comes to fertility and miscarriages. And I think it should spark a conversation bigger than all of us to start talking about. And that probably means that even though mentally we can't handle it, we should start having kids at 25 because the older you get, the more challenges, as you all know. But of course, everything has to come into play. You got to have a kid when you're ready. But I just want you to know you're not alone. And I learned that in this process. And when I did finally put my story out on Instagram and Facebook on my Hey Frase pages, I hope I even was able to answer all the messages. So many people, I mean, miscarriages, 4 or 5 miscarriages, people who've been through methotrexate shots, then went on to have a healthy child, people that had scar tissues from DNC, had that removed, then had a kid. So you're definitely not alone. There are so many people out there going through the same thing. And definitely if you feel like you need to share or you need to reach out to those people, do, because it's so important to know that, we're not alone in this journey, that we have other women, other couples going through it. So I wanted to do this podcast today to hopefully help and encourage and inspire you if you are trying to have a baby or if you're currently going through a miscarriage. It is one of the shittiest moments, but I'm here to tell you it does get better. Currently, we are not pregnant. I'm heading into my 3rd round of methotrexate shots. Again, if you are a woman that's just been diagnosed with a partial molar pregnancy or molar pregnancy and you have methotrexate shots ahead of you, I want you to not be worried. I'm going to do a whole nother podcast on that. If I can do it, because I am like a nervous, scared Nelly, you can do it and you can come out better and stronger. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram and on Facebook on all my social platforms. It's at Hey Frase, HeyFrase. I always love to hear from you guys. So if you want to DM me on Instagram, that would be great. Same thing, you can send me a Facebook message. This video is also out on YouTube, so we hope you subscribe to the channel. Again, Monday through Friday, it's usually like comedy. We're doing impressions. We're talking pop culture, but life also happens. So I wanted to do this podcast today to share some of my life and what's been going on. You can leave a comment here on the YouTube channel after you hit subscribe, after you turn on your notifications, and let me know what you're going through. But I just wanted to say I hear you, I'm seeing you, I'm thinking about you, and there is hope after miscarriage. So I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in today, and thank you for watching. If you're on this journey, I hear you. It's really tough, but there are better days ahead. Bye, guys. Love you so much. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Casbah.